We actually started out in San Francisco, my co-founders and I, and the last 20 people that we've hired have been in Berlin, and so we're growing sort of our presence here in Berlin. And I spend more time here in Berlin. I did a talk in this series a couple of months ago, and I started reaching out to a lot of other people that are in the language learning space. It turns out there's a whole bunch of language learning companies in Berlin for a number of different reasons. And I found it really interesting that there were so many language learning companies in Berlin and really good, famous language learning companies. And so I thought it might be interesting to do a speaker series over the course of this year where some of these founders that I've gotten to meet in Berlin that run these language learning companies that are all very different, take very different approaches to language learning, use very different technologies in language learning, that I can bring them up and we can have conversations about why they chose Berlin, what they think about the future of language learning, what they think about technology in language learning is. And then we can all have a conversation on that. So I'm really blessed that in the course of me reaching out to all of these founders in Berlin, that I got to know Thomas Holl, who is the CTO of Babbel, one of the largest language learning companies in the world, I think, and is headquartered here in Berlin and has several hundred employees just down the street, I believe, or and he agreed to come on and talk about how he got into the language learning space, how Babbel thinks about language learning, and what the future of language learning is. So please give a round of applause for Thomas. So I wanted to start out, we're just going to stand here semi-awkwardly, so I apologize to everybody, but it's a little bit easier to see everybody. I'm going to ask Thomas a bunch of questions. We'll talk a little bit about this journey that he's had, and then we'll open it up for questions. So if you guys think about questions that you have, at the end I'll do Q&A, and you can ask Thomas or myself any questions that you have, and we'll be happy to answer them. So I'd love to start with how you got started, what sort of your background is, how you got into language learning, why that was an interesting thing for you, and sort of how Babbel came out of it.
Sure. So thanks for having me. I'm super excited about being here in the Mindspace space. So I have a background in the computer science, so I was always, since a very early age, actually into building stuff. So whether that was hacking, whether this was the early demo scene where we built really crazy things, where it was pretty clear that this was not good for anything. Like you couldn't earn any money with that. So that was from an early stage. Had a super small company during my student years. Sold that company actually in music tech, so we built DJ software and basically completely digital. Then spent a couple of years after selling that to Native Instruments here in Berlin, and then actually got back to create a music tech company. So that was early 2006 and 2007. And we had a perfect team to actually do that. So we were 4 people, 2 engineers, really deeply into that engineering background with more than 10 years experience. We had one of the founders of Native Instruments and on the founding team as well. And we had people from with a great background in music and tech. And then we started language learning app. So that was quite a shift, and everybody said like, hey, this is totally stupid, you have no idea what you're doing. And that was about right, but I think for us this really was the Kickstarter, because the way we approached the whole language learning part was to build a product that I personally would love to use, and not something that is didactically correct, that has like too much gamified elements in there. So we got started because we wanted to build something that wasn't there in 2007.
And how much has so since you started Babbel, how much has the product changed? The sort of idea that you had, is what exists today that we would download off the internet and start using now, is it vastly different than sort of what your first idea of what you wanted it to be is, or has it sort of been along the same path?
So there's a couple of changes that we did. There were some technology changes, because in 2007 everything was flash based. Whenever you wanted to play audio, if you wanted to do animations, there is some nodding. This was a pretty awful time, but exciting. So a lot of technology changed under the way. In the first time we thought like this is going to be web only. There was no iPhone, only like the big Nokia devices. So we couldn't imagine our software running there. And then the next big shift for us was really tablets. where everyone believed tablet is the next big thing, everything that happens on learning will happen on the tablet. And we were all dead wrong. It turned out that the mobile phone is actually a much, much better device when it comes to adoption. So quite a lot of changes on the technology side that we had to adapt, and quite a lot of changes on the product side as well, because in the beginning we wanted to be a social network for language learning with a small part of self-learning. And it's one of those things where an idea sounds super exciting, super great, and then you try for 2 and 3 years, and then you figure out, damn, we're not going to make it work, because it turned out that Facebook is a good social network, even a social network for learning languages, and no other company pulled that off. So yes, quite a lot of changes, especially on the product and marketing and business model side as well.
So you're talking about using technology and how the technology has changed. How do you see technology as being really helpful in learning a language, through Babbel, that it would be different if it was manual or something? Like what is the real advantage that you see in using technology to learn a language this way?
I think that the biggest advantage in a way is that with the type of mobile devices that we have nowadays, that the friction to actually start is so much lower than anything that has been there before. I don't think that lots of things have changed on the didactic side. There is 200 years of research on how to acquire a language. People have been learning languages since a lot of time, since pretty long. There is quite a lot of research that happened in that space. But what really changed, I think, was the availability of something where you didn't have to buy a teacher or go to a class or buy a book and figure out what to do, but you could just download an app and then get started. I think that for me was like the biggest revolution that happened, because it would allow quite a lot of more people to start that journey. And then, because language learning always is around fear, am I good enough? It's the moment of embarrassment. And I think what apps have done and the technology has done is I can trust myself. I can build the confidence by starting with an app before going out and speaking in a public way, which is, I think, for many people super, super frightening, especially in a different language.
Yeah. So how do you see that Babbel how do you see people getting over that hump, right, of going out and actually using a language for real? Like, do you feel that your software or any other stuff, like, what are the technological solutions to helping people get over that, how to speak to people?
Yeah. I think the one thing is probably a very low-tech entry, which is not giving embarrassing feedback in terms of like making people embarrassed of their mistakes. And I think that's the biggest technology shift when it comes to voice recognition, that there is not another person listening to you and judging you silently in the background. It's like, nah, this is not good. But it's a machine. You can talk to a machine, and the machine is not judging. I think that's probably the biggest thing for quite a lot of people. So we're seeing a hard time actually to do that first step and actually speak. I think that's the most important part.
So I'm curious, internally, how do you measure sort of success for your students, right? Or for the people using your platform? What are you trying to get them to accomplish when they sign up?
So we, because I think we rather stumbled into that, but since we wanted to build something that I would love to use, I was always around I wanted to speak. I didn't want to read or to write a foreign language so much, but rather be able to have a conversation with people. And then if you look at quite a lot of language learning apps, they tell you stuff like the boy, the girl, the boy drinks milk, the woman eats rice, which is super, like, they're correct sentences and the grammar is perfect, but you're never going to be able to use these sentences unless it's like really late in the evening and you just stumble to talk like things. So for us it was always taking that. We wanted to build something that you could, after a lesson, then go out and actually apply. So everything we do is very communicative. So first lessons always is saying hi, saying bye, then there's some grammar, there's some vocabulary, next is introducing yourself, like in a restaurant, like very communicative settings, and that's basically how we structured all the courses and the technology around that as well.
So do you see from the students that you have patterns in which students make it really far, like what their backgrounds or what their motivations are? Because I think that you guys do capture some of that data, right? Like, so what makes a successful language learning student?
Yeah. So there is the obvious thing, if you get forced by a system, whether that's your boss to learn English or whether that's because you need to get better grades, then this is a big trigger and for people actually to continue with that because there is the external stick involved. But that's only a small percentage of people that are coming to us for learning. What we typically see is people who are learning French, for example, for some social reason, like they married a French man, they have like some family, some relatives. This is a super strong trigger for them to actually continue with that and to progress. So we're seeing quite a lot of variance between the different motivations and how long and how far people are getting, which is really the thing of how big is your motivation, how big is your why. Why are you learning a language in the first place? If it's just to dabble around because you thought it would be interesting, then I think you don't make it as far as if you've got a really compelling reason.
So what do you see are the important sort of stages in learning a language, right? Like from zero to having a conversation, like what do people have as goals in between that?
So a lot of different things as well. For some people, it's already enough if they can go out and either like on holidays be able to have a conversation in a restaurant, being able to understand what you're ordering, have like a short chat with a waiter. That is a very specific goal that would probably require an A1, maybe A2 if you really want to progress there. Which is a completely different thing than if you want to hold a presentation in French or Spanish, which is rather on the C level. And the methods, I think, need to change as well. I think with an app like ours, it's pretty easy to get started from I have no idea about Spanish to the point where I can speak some words, some sentences I got understood. But the more you progress, I think the more methods you have to use. You have to talk to real people. You want to watch a movie. You want to read a book, and maybe to really use all of the methods that are out there. I think that's the funnel that gets wider as you progress in your journey.
So I mean, I guess that's a good follow-on question, which is if you had to learn a language, you know, if you were going to move to country. Actually, let me ask a different question first, which is related to that. Do you find, as Babbel, that people coming from different areas, from different countries, are sort of better or worse? We have this conversation a lot about sort of Americans not like learning other languages very often, but largely because it's really difficult to practice other languages, right? You can fly for 5 hours and still be in America, and it's hard to get somewhere. It's a little bit, in Europe, you can fly for an hour and be in a totally different culture. So do you find that people in Europe are finding your app or finding language learning apps more valuable because they have the ability to get farther, right, of actually being able to apply it?
Yeah, I think it's really the being close to someone speaking a different language that makes the trigger. So if we're looking into the US, obviously in Europe you don't need to explain anyone why it might be good to speak English. I think everyone just knows from the gut of your heart why this is a good thing. The funny thing is really in the US there is like some pockets, whether that's in Florida or whether that's like in California in some regions, where there's lots of Hispanics living close by, and we found this is like a really big trigger for people living in those areas who might not speak Spanish natively to really start learning as well. I think the human element always is the most important factor in starting out and having a motivation to learn a language in the first place.
So I'll go back to the other question I was going to ask, which is if you did have to learn a language, right? Being in a language learning company, and then you were talking a little bit about this before. How would you, like, if somebody here wanted to learn a language, what would you recommend that their path be? Like a path to being able to speak successfully?
if you really want to be successful, move to that country, marry someone from that country, get kids, have kids who just speak that. But I think this is the most obvious thing that you probably weren't asking for. But obviously, like being immersed in that language, I think is something that is important to do so. And that's something that you can emulate with a lot of things. But it only works once you're at a certain level, because for my Polish, for example, I would just totally struggle to listen to Polish podcasts and something. But this is something that I did when learning Spanish. I was just listening to some Spanish podcasts in addition to using apps, and I think that's probably what I would advocate as well. Use as many different methods as possible. There is a use for the app, hopefully you're learning with Babbel, but there is a usage for watching movies, maybe Narcos in original without subtitles. You wanna read maybe a book if you're more advanced, and I think all these different methods, like having a teacher is an awesome, fantastic thing that will really help you, but it's all the combinations of those different methods together.
So you guys have, so I'll talk a little bit about the future. One of the themes that I'd like to have in these series is to look at the next 10 years, the next 50 years. What do you think the future of language learning is? Like, both from Babbel's perspective, like where do you want to go? What do you want your product to be, right, for people? And then also, like, how do you think people will learn languages differently in the future?
So for us, and I was hinting at that with just the last sentence, for us it's really about how do we integrate all these methods that are currently out there. There's language travel, but currently it's not integrated. So from a learner perspective, you need to do quite a lot of work to actually stitch yourself a personal learning experience together. If you want to use a teacher, if you want to go to a class, you need to figure out which class to take. And then all of these experiences are completely dispersed, so there is no data sharing, and so the app doesn't really know if you went on holidays for 2 weeks, made quite some progress, then you need to find the right point to entry in and again. And I think for us, this is exactly the part from a strategy point of view where we want to work with third parties, where we want to work with partners to integrate them, basically to offer our learners a much better, more holistic experience, because I think, like I said, it's important to use multiple methods, but currently it's super hard because, at least in Europe, you learn the language in school, but with that you've been like spoon-fed, like learn this, learn that, write a test, and then if you learn in university, you had like a very rigid structure, usually as well. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge when you're coming an adult, and then no one is there for you to actually say like this, do that, and that's what we want to become as a company, and to help you with that transition and with that guide.
So you guys are based mostly in Berlin, is that true?
That's true. Yeah, started in Berlin.
So why did you? I'd like to know a little bit about that growth strategy. Like, why did you grow in Berlin? Why did you start in Berlin? What maybe is special about Berlin that it seems like there are a lot of language learning companies here?
I can do the backward rationalization, which is we have quite a big of didactics people. So this is people creating the courses, and we teach 14 different languages in I think 8 different mother languages, and each course is being adapted. So like the French course for a Polish person would look slightly different than for an Italian person. And for that adaptation and to take into account all the things that you as a native speaker already know, you need lots of people with lots of really weird combinations. So if you try to hire a Portuguese speaker who speaks Swedish at the same time because you want to do these adaptations, then I think there is very few people or few places in the world where you can find these people and be able to afford them. I think that's the other aspect. The other explanation is we were all in Berlin when we wanted to do the music tech company, and we just stay there.
So For just to go back to that as well, I know that there are probably a lot of people in tech or starting their own businesses or something in the room. I think it's interesting to go back to that story about sort of pivoting from wanting to do sort of a music thing and then doing a language thing. Like, what was the trigger for that? Why? How did that decision come about?
So that decision was we were already like into the prototype stage with our music tech part. We're super excited about that. And then my co-founder said like, hey, I wanted to learn Spanish and there is nothing online. And we said like, no, this is bullshit. Let me Google that for you. We all did some Googling and we could just find solutions that were either totally horrible from a user experience, but totally correct from a grammar and didactical perspective. Are there any teachers in the room? Okay, yeah. So sometimes that's what we're seeing is like if you're a teacher, you want to cram in all of the things that you know, and then you place, especially on a small screen, 20 different things and different excursions, different explanations in there. And we said from a user perspective, I'm just starting out, this is confusing me. So we've seen a lot of things that were horrible and we said like, we want to fix that part. And that's what got us triggered because obviously language learning is a much bigger space as well. And it seemed that was the other factor. In music tech, there is so many really talented people working basically for free, building their own synthesizers, building their own stuff, putting so much of their heart and work time in there and building really awesome products. And in language learning, we were looking around and we were only seeing these things where it was obvious that nobody put that much love and effect into that. So we felt like we wanted to use our attention to detail and build really a beautiful thing. And applied it to language learning. I think that's what all got us triggered.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So if anybody has questions, think of them, and then I'll ask my one question, and then I'll ask for answers. So I get asked this actually a lot, being a language learning company as well, about sort of technology in being able to understand, in being able to communicate, right? Of having like these Google things in your ear where you're speaking in German and I can, it comes in English in my ear or something like that. Do you think that technology in the future will make language learning less important?
I think it will make it less important for a specific type of use, and this is, I think, for very transactional use of language. I think that's definitely something that will go down. Like if I just need to go somewhere, buy something, I don't care about the relationships so much, but I just want to get a task done. I want to do a deal, but maybe not care so much about the other person. Then I think automating all of that translation piece is something that will take away that part. But I think what always will be there is like that need to connect on a human level. And then to go for that extra mile and learn a language, I think there's quite a lot of use cases where I don't see that going away in the future at all, because language very much has something to do with your identity, with how you grow up, with memories, and I think everyone appreciates that. If you go to Italy and are just able to speak, 5, 10 phrases and understand a little bit, I think that's a completely different emotion that you get than if you would just plug in the universal translator for that.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. Do we have any questions? Yes.
I have questions to both of you. If you're prepared to share, if there are any interesting ideas or generalizations that you weren't expecting, but what you got from user feedback.
From user data?
Yeah, other things that you found out about your customers that you weren't expecting.
There's let me think of that. Maybe from a technology perspective first, and then get into the user part, is when we started out, we're like all engineers, and so we had that very analytical mindset. It's like, yeah, we're going to do that language translation system, and we're going to build a system where you can easily translate and build like an authoring system around that, and everything will be mostly automated, until we figured out, damn, this is the path to insanity. So if you want to, like, Swedish has some very interesting edge cases that you can't really get into other languages. And I think every language has like their own unique things. So after a couple of years, we said like, no, this fantasy is over. We're going to do a proper, we're going to do a language learning experience per language that we're teaching, and it has nothing to do with anything else. So we can really handcraft that. From a user perspective, probably it's what I didn't expect so much is the age groups that we're seeing. So initially, I think in our 2008 business plan, we wrote something, this language learning, something from 25, basically out of school, until 35, 45. But one of our oldest users is Gianni from Italy, and I think he now turned over 105. And he's learning with Babbel to actually connect with his granddaughter who lives in the States. And this is something that is just like mind-blowing, a very specific individual thing, not based on big data, but on a very emotional story as well. So that was something I would have never expected. How about you?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So I mean, one of the things that I think has been surprising to us is the number of children that try to use the platform. Their parents want them to learn another language, and so they come in. Nothing that we've built is really appropriate for children. Right? Like going and buying shoes, or ordering at a restaurant or something. Like, it's pretty funny to make a 9-year-old do that. I have tried, but they don't really like it. So like, what are the exercises look like in order to do that? What does privacy look like? So there's a whole bunch of things that I think we've been struggling with, of just seeing that there is this big like we're talking about motivational factors, that a big motivational factor is parents trying to get their kids to learn a language that maybe they don't know, or they would like them to know for whatever reason. We've also found that America is not a very good market, sort of the way that we thought it would be, that the people that really get far and spend a lot of time in the system and really have the motivation are the people that live within, like you were saying, the people that live within the countries, right? People learning German that live in Germany, or people learning Spanish that live in Spain. It took us a while to do that. I think we kind of originally thought that people would be learning a language for future travel, or for something that they knew or something. And it really is like, I need to learn this because I live here. So this is interesting. Do we have another question? Yeah. Yeah.
From both UX and perspective and as a teacher, something that's been on my mind recently. My mom and my auntie recently moved to Costa Rica, and they're in their 60s, and I've been trying to coach them through, I speak Spanish, and I've been trying to coach them through like how they can kind of get themselves into this. And my mom works in IT, so she's not really struggling with it. She kind of is like, okay, like I'll figure it out. But my aunt, like every time she goes on something, she's like, oh, the buttons are too small, and all the this and all, and it's, when you talked about the age ranges, it kind of popped into my brain, like, have you noticed with these older, with this older customer, or any of your older clients, do they stick with it? I mean, of course, this one guy has his personal motivation that maybe would get him on those small buttons or something he maybe otherwise, might not own a smartphone, but because of this personal motivation. With your older clients, are you finding that they stick with it? And what are you doing to maybe help them with that?
So for the first 3 years, probably in the history of the company, whenever we would bring people in to learn and we would watch them, we would never get questions about the learning material, never. It was always exactly like you described. What does this button do? How can I go back? Oh, this is too fast for me. I need to do something else. How do I do that? And this took us really probably 3 years to like at least get to a point where we would get feedback sometimes like, why is this? What's happening here, like on a language side? And what we developed internally at that time is something like a testing approach. We would say you need to be able to use the app after 2 years, because then this is like the right level of user friendliness to make sure like it touches quite some larger age ranges. and which doesn't really address the 100-year-old people so much. But this is still something that comes up regularly, absolutely. What we do on a not necessarily product experience directly, but we have quite a large customer service team, and especially in those age ranges, we are like answering a lot of things like, how do I clean my cookies? Is that a virus? Why do I need to log in? Like these very basic things, because they seem to be the hurdle for quite a lot of people. I'm not sure how much we can do on the product side necessarily, because I think it's a different thing if you grow up with that technology, or you need to like learn very basic things, and the ability to distinguish between a browser and the website or the product is something that I think that is super hard to teach, but we help them with real people on the other side as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a former language teacher, current programmer, so I'm really interested in this intersection. And it occurred to me that something that tech does really well is like lookalike audiences, gathering data for like people like you want to buy this, people like you want to read this article. But I feel like every time I use a language app, they're trying to teach me in the way they want to teach me. And it seems like it would be a lot more effective to do like people like you learn in this way. People like you learn, because I know there's different people learn different ways, and like some things are more effective for some students than others. But I haven't yet found an app that like uses that customer centricity for learning. Do you guys, does anybody else do that, or do you guys do that, or?
No, I mean, I think that's something that we have found a lot as well, right? Like, so the way that, I don't know if you know Chatterbug as well, but the way that we work is we have a whole bunch of ways of doing self-study, and then we have these live lessons where you connect over video. And we found that a lot of the really successful people are the ones who get into the videos, and then or into the live lessons with the teacher. And a lot of times they just kind of stop doing the self-study, and they just do the video thing because it's easier, right? Like you don't have to sit there and like force yourself to do the study. And so we've been trying to fix that, right? Of being like, it would be much more effective to you if you did some sort of self-study, if you tried to prepare yourself at all for the lessons that you did. And so we're trying a lot of different things. Like, can you do it with only watching movies, or mostly, watching videos online or something? Like, what are the ways of exposing you to vocabulary and exposing you to grammar in ways that will prepare you for the lesson with the tutor? And can it be more ad hoc, or do we have to, because you're right, like before we would prescribe everything, right, and say, these are all the things you need to do before you can go and take a live lesson with the tutor. And I think we're backing out of that and saying, like, here's what you need to do in the live lesson, what are the different ways we could prepare you for that, and letting you choose, right? And so, yes, I mean, it is something that I think we're trying to figure out right now, right, is look at all of these different ways and say, what are the different ways we could prepare you for that in a way that you actually really enjoy, right, and want to do. And it's interesting too, I think the problem with sort of self-study or with learning is that I don't know that people really have these like learning styles, but where they really learn more effectively differently than one another, but I do think that they think that they do. And so a lot of actually what we're learning, I think, in putting these things out is not like, I came at it from a very software developer standpoint of saying like, this is the most effective way of learning vocabulary, right? This spaced repetition, flashcard system thing. And it is very good, but like it's really hard to motivate somebody to do that for a long time. And so we kind of have to step back and say like, maybe we don't need to be as efficient as possible. Like maybe we just need to keep people in the system longer, right? And have them enjoy what they're doing, because over time, like if you're super efficient for 2 months, like there's only so much language you can learn. If you're not as efficient for 3 years, then you'll probably get a lot farther in the language, right? Especially if you're talking to people a lot. So.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that probably like as an overgeneralization that the whole tech industry is just trying to figure out as well, that there is like some things that the machines are really good at, and there's some other things that people are good as well, where it's like still pretty early on the automation level. I think my favorite example always is like Deep Blue, the man against the chess, and you have like that supercomputer who can beat like the best player in the world, but it's actually pretty hard to like move the pieces on a chess piece, which is something that the machine is terrible at, which my 4-year-old is like perfect. And I think a similar thing is exactly what we're seeing in here is like, what teachers are doing really well if they've got enough time and to actually care for that is tailor that and taking the hints, figuring out when someone is bored, when someone is maybe struggling. And I think to get these cues is much easier as a human person than it is to figure out these signals from does that person like did he or she type just like waited 2 seconds? Is that because boredom, distractedness? I think that's something that is super hard for a machine to do. So I still believe there's like a huge component in having teachers and actually being able to help with higher level problems and with things that people are good at.
Yeah.
This is a question about user motivation or a database view of what do people really want. On one hand, you would say that people are driven by self-expression and connecting with other people socially. And then you would also say people just want to speak, or the phrase books are really popular. I wonder, what is the conceptualization of most people when they try to learn languages? The universe is like a mysterious vending machine that you have this list of cryptic commands, and you say something and 2 years appear in front of you. Or they were thinking about it in some other way.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
When people try to learn a language, like how do they conceptualize the use of language? If you think about it very pragmatically, they would think of the phrase as a long list of possible actions, a sequence of actions that would trigger something in the universe that is beneficial to them. Like say 2 years please and 2 years appear in front of you. That is useful in a transactional way that you have mentioned before. Or there's this whole more complex system that they have to somehow get into to be able to generate all the expressions.
I think I understand what it is. I think, how do you differ between the people who want to take the holistic approach to learn the language? Like, I want to understand the grammar, I want to understand how to speak, I want to do conversation in multiple ways, like business and with friends, and when I'm drunk, I don't know. And how do you differ that from people who just want to say, okay, I will order beer right now?
So for us, I think.
I mean, was it what you were?
Well, the question is based on the data of what you have seen of the users on the platform. What are they most like? Are they just wanting to do transactions, or do they want to cultivate something new in their brain?
That totally depends on the country. So, for example, in the US, we're seeing quite a lot of more people who are doing language learning for either brain training, which was a new thing to me before starting out. But instead of doing Sudoku puzzles, people it's like, yeah, I'm going to do some French, and it's like useful. It's better than like wasting my time with puzzles. And there's a whole component like to connect with your heritage. Something that is really unique to the US. That's not like something that anyone in German would be doing, or like bio-German, like since five generations. So it's pretty hard to say, and there's a lot of cycles in there going as well, because January is the time when you stop smoking, January is the time when you go to the gym, when you start picking up a language, so then our audience shifts as well. So pretty hard to put like a really generic and rigid answer to this one. Sorry.
Yeah. Could you share any data for how long people regularly learning with apps, and then skip it maybe for some reason? I don't know if you get feedback why and how they stop.
So I can tell a bit about how and why they stop. People usually then always say, it's not you, it's me. I didn't find the time. This is the number one explanation, which obviously is not true. It's never time, it's already like something else, like maybe it's summer, you want to go barbecue, something else gets more important in use. This is like the number one reason for us, which makes it really hard to pinpoint it down to like a very specific moment in time when they decided. At least if you look into like the retention curves for us, it's a gradual decline. There is not one like day, week, something in there where there's like a super deep curve that drops. It's really the constant friction of, because we're more casual, you don't have to learn a language, so then usually people just start coming less often, and that's what you see in the retaining pieces.
Yeah.
Related to what you spoke recently, various users have different approaches to learn. Do you have any, so for example, we cannot hard code any rules to present certain content to a certain user. It's not possible. So do you have any approaches like machine learning or something which you say, okay, I understand how this type of user should be presented this type of content, or do you even like present different contents to different users, like users from a different geography, age group, or nationality or something like this?
So the question is, how much do we differentiate between different user groups, or however we wanna slice and dice them? I think one of the biggest drivers there is really the motivation. Are you learning for holidays? Are you learning for family reasons? Are you learning for something else? Which in our case really shows in the content. So then you will not be presented with certain sentences. Probably doesn't make any sense to learn about like how to shop if you're learning that for business. Currently this is a very manual process still in terms of providing and developing these courses, because for us it's really what we combine the human element to put all of the didactics experience into a product and tailor that to that motivation. And we found that motivation is one big driver. The other part obviously is the level that you're at. Because for a total beginner, it's a completely different thing than for someone super advanced. And as a general rule, the more advanced you get, I think the less useful an app becomes, because then it's all around pronunciation. It's all about figuring out that I say that wrong, is something weird going on. That's probably the two major ones where we differentiated. I think the other factors that we tried don't play nearly a big enough role for us to actually optimize against these two dimensions.
Yeah.
But do you apply some sorting techniques, like some machine learning techniques, to understand, okay, this type of user has to be on this way in terms of content?
Very limited, not necessarily that we feed that back into the product. There's obviously lots of analysis that we're doing with machine learning projection models in terms of how likely is this person to come back the next day based on whatever she did a couple of days before, based on motivation, based on whatever the data we've got as well. But it's super hard to put that into a product that will make a difference. It's super easy to build a model that says like you should do that, but it's super hard to move the needle in terms of how often do those people then come back, which for us is the ultimate goal. Like you said, I'd rather have you like for 6 months really casually learning than for 1 week totally binge learning and then not doing anything again.
Yeah.
For the both of you, Scott, what's your guys' strategy when it comes to the always-on voice assistants, such as Alexa, Google Home? Is there anything coming out in relation to that as far as language learning?
No.
What I'm really bullish about voice and audio, not necessarily in the devices that are at home, because I think what voice technology and the bigger use I think is in the phone that we have, because it allows you to use a voice-only product in many more ways rather than just at home. I think there is quite a lot of professions where you've got dull work to do, but no one is listening to you, or where you can speak, or where you can really put something into your brain. So I think to have an audio component or an audio part where basically you listen, you repeat, something. I think that's the more exciting part to me than talking to your Alexa device, and I think that's what the whole, whether that's Alexa or the Google HomePod is doing, which is they're really struggling in finding additional things to do besides turning on and off the lights and doing home automation and stuff. So I'm really more interested in how we can bring language learning to many more people, which is use cases where we wouldn't use an app because you have to type somewhere and you have to look at the screen. So that's use your time while driving, while doing chores. I think that's for me the more exciting piece, and we're doing research and prototypes in that area. Yes.
Yeah, so you mentioned space repetition before, and I'm sure there's a bunch of like academic concepts that are built into all of your apps that are really taken out of research. And I'm curious whether you keep an eye on research that's coming out of, say, linguistics and educational research, and is there anything cutting edge and interesting that you're trying to incorporate? And yeah, do you keep an eye on that stuff, and is there stuff you're experimenting with in that space?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we do try to keep an eye on research that's coming out. It's actually, interestingly, relatively difficult if you're not in academia to get access to journal content at this point. And so I end up sort of pirating a bunch of stuff on SciHub and whatnot. But and working with my old alma mater, UCSD, to try to get an idea of what the current state of second language acquisition research is, and what we can apply. I think it's in a lot of cases pretty difficult to have some of those research papers turn into something directly applicable, just because of the very specific nature of the language acquisition thing that they're studying, right? To say, okay, we can build this into our product in some way is generally kind of a stretch. But we do try to keep up to date on what it is and see, like, are there interesting things coming out? I was actually supposed to, at the beginning of this, present a research paper. That's what I wanted to do for this series, is to present a research paper at the beginning of all of these. And I'm a little bit under the weather, so I didn't think it worked out that well. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of, I think, very interesting things that we've been looking at, and we'll share in our Slack rooms and stuff, and say, like, here's something coming out. So we do try to keep it up to date on what current academic research in linguistics is.
Yeah, for us, I think there is the two areas that are super interesting. One is around voice recognition. However, most of the research that is being done and that is being commercialized by Google and Amazon mainly is around building an assistant. So basically, the goal there is to understand you no matter what you say and how bad you say it, which is a surprisingly different type of optimization problem than if you want to give like really specific feedback, which is what our customers typically are looking for. It's like, where do I need to improve to sound more natural, or something like that. But I think some of the underlying themes, and especially on the deep learning side, are super interesting, especially for that. It's just that we can't use like really the generic things and apply that to language learning on the one side. So speech recognition is one thing, and the other piece I think that made quite some progress over the last 5 years at least is the whole area around natural language processing. And so we're doing quite some things in at least the Android app. I think the Android app is where we provide a more human feedback as well, using natural language processing, because especially on mobile devices, when you mistype something, it can be a grammar issue, like a really deep thing that you didn't get, or it can be just a typo, and it's surprisingly hard to tell one apart from the other. But that's where a lot of progress has been made, and we've got a small team of around 5 people really coming from research and academia, looking into these things and figure out how to apply it and make a better user experience.
Yeah.
I have a sort of related question, because you've spoken about research and academia, but always from a very technological perspective. What actual kind of expertise do you have on a sort of language teaching academic side, and what's the kind of ratio between sort of teaching input or academic input and the whole marketing technology side?
On me personally, I'm probably 90% technology and product side. That's how we get started. But on the company level, we have 150 people in the didactics people. So these are language teachers. They're instructional designers who take care both of all the content developed. So that is a big part with over 50 people really being full-time employed within the company, doing the structures of the courses, pre-planning ahead and doing the course progression. So that is a big part. So I would say probably it's like 20% of that company is especially invested into building the material with qualified professionals.
What kind of qualifications?
So there is lots of language teaching, obviously, like having a teaching background from a university perspective, or research and perspective into language acquisition that we're employing in that area.
Another one, sorry. It's a little bit related to I think what you asked and what she asked. If you are correct that there are a lot of teaching theories that aren't really tested because teachers lack the data, they just have their students. That would be so cool if you guys could do A/B testing with different, actually flipping and testing teaching theories to see this group proceeded more quickly with this algorithm, this one. Would you ever be able to do that? Could you do that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we can, that's our eventual goal. That was actually one of the goals when I started the company is one of the nice things we can do because our product is focused on these video lessons, right, of having one-on-one conversations with a native speaker, with a teacher, is we ask you at the beginning if we can record them and for your purposes and if we can record them for academic research, if we can use the video to go through. And so technically, once we have enough data in the future, we could go through and code everything and see what does your actual language learning process look like, right? So I learned German and I have almost all of it on video, hundreds and hundreds of hours of me learning German on one-on-one lessons, and it would be interesting to go through and see when did I make this mistake, when did I stop making that mistake, when did I start using this grammatical feature, how was it wrong, how was it corrected, at what point, what input did I get back. So that is something that we would like to do. It's just a matter of data, right? Like how much of this data do we need and how difficult is it to process, which is always a relatively big problem. And that's not what we're focusing on right now. That's what we want to do in a couple of years probably.
I'm dying to read it when it exists.
Yes.
And following this one, can I?
Yeah.
Is there any work that you publish that stems from your work?
For us, no, we're still pretty small in our data set. It's hard to do something. Okay, we'll do maybe one more. Yeah, right here.
So I'm just wondering how different is is either Babbel or Chatterbug depending on the language that you're learning? Like how many versions of Babbel and Chatterbug are there depending on the language that the user is learning? Or is it just the content is just changing and that's it?
Yeah. So for us, it's really about the learning material. So it's really about the content, and that is different. So our Polish course obviously has nothing to do with the Spanish course. It was from the ground up developed to teach Polish versus French or any other language. But the product besides that is generic.
Yeah, I mean, so we have tutors in the target languages. So I mean, we have French. Well, French is in beta now, I think. Spanish, English, and German. And so we have to onboard tutors that speak those languages, and in most cases know sort of the target language as well, so they can help people out. So most of them, I mean, all of the curriculum are developed independently. Actually, if you're a curriculum developer in the room, can you raise your hand? There's a handful of people here. If you're interested in knowing more, you can ask any of them. But so it's all very custom, right? When we do a new language, it's a year of work to go through and do a whole new language, and it's all from I mean, we can reuse patterns, but it's mostly redone, right? Okay, one more.
I think almost every kid is learning now a foreign language. Have you ever thought about using your products in kind of education system to combine it with the learning process there?
Yeah, I mean, we have thought about that. It's a little bit difficult the way that we do it because we have a live person on the other side, so you either have to pay them, which for like a classroom of 30 kids or whatever, it's all of our stuff is built one-on-one, and so that makes it a little bit more difficult to do that type of thing. It's affordable for a school system. We could do some swapping type thing, but for kids it's a little bit more difficult for an educational system. But it's something we might try to figure out at some point. I think it would be valuable, at least as you know, as being added on to sort of classroom work. Right? And yourself, do you guys do educational sales as well?
We do have quite a lot of customers or people learning with us who are kids, like either 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. I don't think our product works particularly well like under that, like before you can really read and write and type and use like a smartphone, which is surprisingly early, but like really type, it doesn't make so much sense. So we get lots of people coming in there and then have their parents pay for that. But we're not especially targeting the school system because we have no clue yet how to do that in a very sustainable way, and I think very few digital companies have a good understanding of how to do that in the first place.
Okay, so I'll end that there. If you have other questions, you can come up and ask Thomas or myself. There's also beer in the back, which we'd like to get through all of it if possible, so please help yourself to beer. We did pay for that, so. Thank you very much. I'd like to have a round of applause for Thomas. And we'll see you at the next ChatterTalk. Thanks.